how do you avoid accidents in the future? Look, if we want this technology to take off, we cannot keep having Teslas crashing and Tesla claiming that they're fully self-driving and people really expecting, I think, not only the cars to drive, but to fly them around. It's there's marketing and then there's customer education. And these companies are really playing a fine line. And what happens if we see more crashes like the Uber crash that happened in Arizona, like the Tesla crashes that are happening, we are going to see less and less investment and the entire industry is going to crash if there's no public trust in these vehicles.
Hi, everybody. This is How Tech Becomes Law, a public interest tech podcast about technology, public policy, and career advice. We are your co-hosts, Jingyan Zhang and Dhruv Gupta. This week, we have a conversation with Prachi V from the MBTA about innovation in the mobility space.
Prachi works on autonomous vehicle safety standards, digital and shared mobility projects, and electric mobility services and infrastructure. Today, she leads the implementation of AI/ML technologies at the MBTA and also builds safety protocols for Safe AI, an automation firm. Previously, she led product and innovation at AES, a Fortune 100 energy firm, in the e-mobility division, and also developed EV standards for workplaces and fleets at Forth. Prior to that, Prachi worked with the World Bank on urban transportation projects in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, really living up to the name World Bank. Beyond work, Prachi serves on the board of mobility startups and leads committees at TRB and SAE. She also co-founded Womanium, an organization that advances young women in the STEM domain. Thanks so much for joining, Prachi. It's really good to have you. Tell us more about what you do. We know you do a lot here.
I indeed do a lot, but I have a lot of fun in everything I do. So I started off my work journey coming fresh off of the London School of Economics and Political Science, studying mathematics and economics, thinking I'll work in the energy and environmental field. So I was here in Washington, D.C., and I started working with an organization called World Resources Institute, WRI. And my first work and my first job was writing a whole report on how climate is going to impact the supply chain of different companies. In fact, something we are seeing today with the fires in California, with the drought in the middle of the country, and of course with more and more climatic disasters around the country. But what really caught my eye while working at WRI is another division of WRI, which was focused on something called BRT systems, which are bus rapid transit system. At the time, these colleagues of mine were building a BRT system in Istanbul, in Turkey. And within 6 months of building that project, what used to be 3 hours of traffic became 30 minutes. And today, 1 million people use this transit system every day. So, while working and studying climate, I was also working with the managing director, heads at the State Department, and international leaders on climate negotiation. I realized what actually makes real tangible difference in people's lives is infrastructure. Policy takes a lot of time, and I know we'll talk about policy in this podcast, but what makes true impact? Think of it through millennia itself. It's the innovation that mankind has created. It's technology, it's infrastructure that has made the greatest impact in our lives. Coming back to how I got into transportation, it's looking at that project in Istanbul. From there, I worked at the World Bank, which was really exciting because I got to work on projects and understand the similarities in challenges as well as the potential solutions that could be applied in Africa, it could be applied in Latin America, and could be applied in Asia as well. World Bank also moves a bit slowly. So I started mentoring and advising startups. And I realized that it's not only infrastructure, but what's at the cutting edge is most important. And if anyone wants to be a leader in the field, it's really understanding what's going to be not just the technology of today, but the technology of tomorrow. So this is where I started advising and mentoring startups. In fact, all 3 of them, we got acquired by Daimler, the owner of Mercedes-Benz. In fact, Carl Mercedes, who invented the car, they understand the car very well, but they don't understand modern transportation technology. So they had to invest and purchase the 3 startups I was advising. And that's how I got into the innovation space as well. So today I work with the MBTA, like you said. I focus on all technologies that impact how people are accessing MBTA facilities, be it the subway, be it the ferries, or be it commuter rail. But I also advise startups. I advise startups in the automation field, as well as in the vehicle electrification field.
Thank you for the context there. It's just such an incredible career so far. And it sounds like you're just getting started too. You've got a bunch going on. Let's pick up on this last thing that you mentioned. You mentioned that, vehicle electrification and the forefront here. It looks like we're at this precipice. We're about to really take off. What are you seeing?
I'm absolutely excited. I've read both the infrastructure bills. It took quite some time of my week, but they're both headed in the right direction. Look, we can't just have electric vehicles. We can't just rely on the private sector and Tesla and more Elon Musk to say, please make electric cars for us. We also need to do the other thing. Just like at every other corner, you're going to see a gas station in this country. We need to be replacing that or adding at least EV stations at every other corner. Yeah, the biggest fear that's holding people back from adopting EVs has always been range anxiety. And range anxiety means the fear of, running out of juice in your car and realizing, all right, that's not a station nearby. I'm going to be stranded in the middle of nowhere. To get rid of that, there are different estimates, but we need some number of stations every kilometer, some number of stations for every person that may be in the country to get rid of this fear and overcome these gaps. So the infrastructure bills, again, has plans for adding charging stations, not only in Boston and cities like DC, San Francisco, but also corridor charging as well. So those corridors along the West Coast, along the East Coast, and where people are traveling, where they make those long trips.
In your role at the MBTA, which is a public transit agency here in Massachusetts, is that who you think we represent in terms of the public sector taking on a strong role in establishing those stations versus say an alternative model such as with Tesla and the supercharger network and having the private sector building out those stations?
Absolutely. So without any political bias, because I think if you're libertarian, you may say one thing. If you're not, you may say another. I see there's a role for both. I mean, Tesla's done an amazing job bringing on those early adopters for electric vehicles. And when I say we, I mean the entire country. So that does include governments at the federal level, as well as the city and state level, stepping in. What Tesla has created is a network that can only be used for Tesla cars. But again, if we have a neutral government agency come in, then that infrastructure is widely used, no matter which car you may have. And that's more efficient in terms of building, that efficient in terms of the usage it's going to get. So that's just a smarter and better way to go about it. And I'll just give you some comparisons where the US is really lagging in charging infrastructure at the moment. Countries like China have about 800 to 900,000 charging stations already, versus we have 40,000 in this country. And of course, even small countries like Norway have a charging station every 50 kilometers. So that tells you the vision they've had as a small country to build out the infrastructure for their people.
That sounds like a chicken and egg problem, right? How do we get the chicken out of the egg before the egg is, even there, right? Like if there isn't charging infrastructure, then there ends up being range anxiety. But if people aren't buying cars because of range anxiety, then you have less charging infrastructure.
I think every technology in some ways is chicken and the egg. And it begs the larger question, right? Where do we want to go as a society? Where do we want to go as a country? What are the kind of carbon emission reduction goals that we want? And how do we get there? And then you ask, all right, what kind of infrastructure do we need on the private sector side, on the government side, in terms of standards, all of that?
I guess just piggybacking off of what you just said, is this somewhere you think the government is falling short? Do you think the infra bill is a step in the right direction, but not a leap in the right direction? Where do you think we need to go from here?
First, the US is lagging behind in electric vehicles in the past 10 years. So the largest EV market is 44% of it is in China, about 30% in Europe. And then the US has a small percentage. And that's what we're trying to catch up. Look, we do not have sufficient battery makers in this country. There's a company called CATL, which did not exist less than 5 years ago. And today it's one of the largest battery makers, and it's in China. So clearly, it's not just innovation, but bringing things to scale and having the kind of government, private sector, research, industry, all working together to again move towards the technologies that we want to see in the future.
Well, where we did see a massive surge of investment was in the autonomous space. And it seems like it's cooled off a little bit over the last couple of years as people have gotten more realistic, let's say. What are you seeing there? Is that, I know you have a good amount of experience here as well.
Yeah. So I would say everything that we are doing with regards to passenger automated vehicles is wrong.
Oh. Wow.
Okay.
So
That's
take.
let me break that
controversial.
down. And the point of a podcast, right? To have fun and maybe bring up some new ideas.
Good. This is how we get ratings. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, so let me justify the statement I made. What are we doing wrong with passenger automated vehicles? I would say almost everything. There's heavy dependency right now on the private sector to make one vehicle fully automated. That means every vehicle on the road needs to have you ever seen a Waymo or a Argo car? It has like a billion cameras on top on every different angles. It has at least, 10 different radar systems. These things get expensive very quickly. Of course, all the data that's getting collected then has computation needs as well. And that adds weight to the car. Obviously adds cost to the car as well. So that's a very expensive way of approaching a problem. So that's on the private sector side. What I'm seeing in the government side is sincere and really missing understanding of what automated technologies are and how to go about regulating them. What the US DOT has done is come out with these AV policy documents. And then what each of the states are doing is at the DMV level, asking any private sector company, say a Waymo operating and testing in California, asking them for the number of disengagements that they have. So this is every time a driver needs to take control of a car, that's counted as a disengagement where the autonomy side has failed. That's clearly not enough to understand how these vehicles are operating, how do you avoid accidents in the future. Look, if we want this technology to take off, we cannot keep having Teslas crashing and Tesla claiming that they're fully self-driving and people really expecting, I think, not only the cars to drive, but to fly them around. It's there's marketing and then there's customer education. And these companies are really playing a fine line. And what happens if we see more crashes like the Uber crash that happened in Arizona, like the Tesla crashes that are happening, we are going to see less and less investment and the entire industry is going to crash if there's no public trust in these vehicles. So really it's the industry coming together and saying we need to hold each other accountable, and the government certainly playing a stronger role in that as well.
Is this where you think NHTSA needs to step in and set ground rules, set test tracks? What needs to happen?
There needs to be more regulation and more understanding of what is the right data to be asking and how do you have safe deployment of automated vehicles. Absolutely needs to play a role. I think the other agency that's failed is a little bit on the SAE side and then the customer education side as well. So SAE has the SAE levels 0 to 5 to describe autonomy levels. So 1 or 0 being fully non-automated and 5 being fully automated. They're great standards. The problem is no one in the industry understands them very well. In fact, like Toyota is building, across 2, 3, and 4 right now. So no one fits cleanly into a bucket. And of course, from the public side, no one understands these standards. So we need better framing of autonomy as well, coming from industry and, going through the press into our common knowledge. But of course, this industry is evolving. It's evolving very fast, and we are going to see new regulations, new best practices come out of here.
What sorts of new regulations and best practices would you be interested in?
I think this is true for every industry, the data ownership question and solving that as well. Do we keep the consumer at the heart of this and really give people choice? Mm-hmm. Imagine, for example, if Facebook came to you and said, all right, I'm not going to track either of you.
Right.
Instead, I'll give you the option. Either you give me your data for free and you get Facebook for free, or you pay $5 a month and we don't send your data to all these third parties where your data goes today. Consumers today don't have that kind of choice. But ideally, in a world I would like to live in would be a world where data ownership is a question that everybody's thinking about. Privacy is something everybody's thinking about. And innovation is something that everybody thinks about as well. Today, again, anyone who owns data is going to be king.
Does that have to happen at the federal level, like at the government level? Or can like an organization like SAE say, if you want, to partner with us for various reasons, then you have to do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the push needs to happen from somewhere. Why was SAE created in the first place? So just as a bit of history lesson, SAE stands for the Society for Automotive Engineers. And it's an organization created by Henry Ford in the early 1900s. This was the time where cars were getting more and more predominant on American streets and, occasionally killing a person or a few people here and there. And this is where the government said, all right, we need to make better and safer cars. So the industry said, well, hold on, don't regulate us. Regulations are bad. We will self-regulate. we will come up with these standards, we will come up with these practices so that we hold each other accountable. We will all follow these standards, but we don't want government to come and tell us because that's going to hurt our innovation, that's going to hurt our bottom line. But the push was there because of public outcry, because of some government push. So again, I think, an educated workforce and government that works in people's interests will make sure that the private sector is remaining competitive and works in the consumer's favor.
So, Prachi, let me ask you a question. Where is the V2X revolution that I've been promised? What happened to it?
Yes. What happened to it? Like every good technology requires multiple players. We can't just go and tell Google, hey, make something cool for us and expect it to come tomorrow. So V2V, V2X also requires not just the right infrastructure, not just, the capabilities we have today with 5G technologies, but also municipalities, state governments, traffic enforcement agencies all coming together and saying, we will adopt this. So imagine you have a vehicle and that vehicle can communicate to the vehicle in front of you. So that's V2V, vehicle to vehicle communication, where I know, all right, you're braking, I should brake too. Or you're going at the speed, great, I could platoon after you, maybe even have a hands-free approach and go at the same speed as you because we're going to the same destination or using the same corridor. There's also V2P, which for me, again, braking with the city and with the transit agency is very exciting, which is vehicle to pedestrian. So again, imagine a cyclist with a smartphone knowing that there's a car right behind him or her. There's V2N, which is vehicles to a mobile network. Especially with 5G technology, this is going to be very exciting because it first allows the vehicle to be smart, to have some kind of read to something capability, but then also opens up opportunities for a better multimedia experience. So in car, you're able to do much more than play shitty games while your car is charging. No offense to Tesla, but there could be better things that are happening. So this is kind of the V2X suite that we are looking at. What I mentioned earlier is autonomy. The way we are doing it is very computationally intensive. It's very expensive to add all these sensors to the cars. And this is what I think is going to slow down a deployment in the passenger automated vehicle sector. However, there's a different approach we could take, which is combining autonomy with the V2, V2V, V2X. And this is, in fact, the approach that China as a country is taking as well, where the Chinese think that 5G is essential to their autonomous driving roadmap. And they realize that 5G can reduce the high costs of onboard equipment. It could increase the speeds at which these autonomy cars are working at as well. I'll give you the example. Just pre-pandemic, I was in a Waymo car, which, in California, and my friend was showing me, this is our greatest car. It's like new features, and come, let's go for a test drive. And of course, the car moves very, very, very slowly because it has to be extremely cautious. And while it's moving, so it was going at maybe 20, 30 miles an hour. And again, the Chinese have realized that as well. And when they combined automated vehicle technology with the cellular, so C2B technology, is what we realized is, again, the speeds can go at much higher because the car has information about what's happening in its environment much more quickly. It can make decisions. The computation is not happening on board. It can also happen outside of the vehicle. Maybe even cars can share LiDARs and radars as well, right? So we could share the same sensor equipment as well if you're all taking the same input. It's an entire ecosystem that you're creating. And ecosystems are hard to make. It requires a lot of coordination. It requires a lot of initial capital funding as well. Remember, this is not easy to deploy. Think of 5G too, right? 5G only works in line of sight, so you'll need a node literally at every corner. And this is kind of similar infrastructure lift that we're looking at. Again, in this country, we've heavily underinvested in infrastructure for a long time. And if I were to call President Biden and say you should add something to the infrastructure bill, I would say, let's focus on V2V and make your dreams come true.
Yeah, I've been waiting. Is this a government thing? Just like, we were talking about charging networks and making that parallel to electric vehicles. Is this something where NHTSA has to get involved and say, all new cars from 2025 have to have this particular sensor, or is it SAE? Who has to put this together?
Yeah, it's like you identified all the players, right? It's the government, it's U.S. Department of Transport, it's also the FCC because we need control over the bandwidth. I think 5G is very different. It opens many more applications for us, and that's the technology now that we should be looking at to build upon.
I'm kind of curious to follow up on your discussion around China, right? And China being as an alternative model, where are the challenges you see in terms of applying the lessons or the potential opportunities that we can gain from looking at China to the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure it's apples to apples comparison. Look, in terms of data privacy, right, we need to ask the question is how do we empower our drivers and how do we support innovation? And currently it's the incumbents that are winning. I'll give you another example. Just, a few years ago here in Washington, D.C., I was at an RPE conference. And at the same conference, there was a team from Bell Labs, and they were showing me this 5G transponder they had made, which was the smallest 5G transponder in the world at the time. And it was pretty amazing. It was like a software-defined and controlled radio with steer beaming and had some really great technologies. But where is that transponder today? Nowhere to be deployed. But instead, you have companies like AT&T that are coming out and saying, "Oh, we have 5G. We just call it 5GE." But look under the hood, it's just 4G with some lipstick on top. So what we've done is we've let these incumbents win for such a long time that they're killing innovation in the fields. So we're really taking this innovation we have and shutting it down. And this is where, again, I think just stronger support and a breaking down of big tech so we can allow more innovation to happen would be the right method for us, for all the innovation we create in this country to really support that. That's the path I would recommend forward.
So this is a hot take that you've said in passing. What does the breakdown of big tech mean to you?
That's a good question. So I will rephrase that as what does true innovation and competition mean for me? Because when I look at every industry today, I see that there are monopolies or oligopolies, right? There are 3 or 4 major players and they dominate the sector. And ideally, I would love to see thousands of them and a true consumer choice as well.
What are, at the risk of future career potential, what are examples of this that you might see? You mentioned AT&T. The canonical example is Google, Facebook, etc. What's one that you want to point to?
Look, I think at least in the world I'm working in, it's very exciting, which is why I work with startups as well, right? There's so many innovative startups that are coming in the transportation sector. So I would say anyone who's interested in the sector, come join. There's so much money. There's so many great ideas, and we still don't have major dominant players that are buying everything.
Right. I was going to say, if anything, when it comes to vehicles, right, is that you're seeing this competition between these companies, whether it's between Apple or Google or the OEMs, the car manufacturers themselves, to say like who's going to control the dashboard and the devices.
Exactly. And electric vehicles, are a game changer, right? Because look, they require 10% of the components that an ICE internal combustion engine car requires. So that means production is way simpler. And if you could put together an EV kit, give me a chassis and a kind of frame that I want, great. I have a custom car for myself. So that's the kind of innovation I'm really excited about in the electric vehicle sector.
That's cool. And I guess more broadly speaking, you've been at the cutting edge of technology for a while, running strategy, technology opportunities, development. What are you excited about?
What am I excited about? I think fundamentally what really excites me is technology and freedom. And I don't mean freedom in a kind of simple way, but I mean freedom in a very deep way, which is think of the jobs that we've had to do for millennia, right? A lot of them were the DDDs, the dangerous, the degrading, or the dirty jobs. One example I can give you is coal mining. Not very safe. A lot of mining is also done underground. And one of the companies that I'm advising today is Steve AI, a California-based company. We're building automation, but we're building automation for the mining sector. We have still today a lot of operators at a mine. It's not a safe environment. And if automation is going to help anyone, it's this operator at a mine that's sitting there and doing this kind of work. And the ability for the same person to do it remotely, sit at the comfort of a chair and have a tele-operator job where they're remotely controlling the vehicle, or fully automating a truck's load haul dump cycle so the truck knows where to go, it knows where to pick up materials, it knows where to drop it. And again, these operator jobs are elevated to more managerial or supervisor positions are where I think, autonomy truly and this innovation truly gives someone freedom from these kind of jobs. And from, what we've had to do throughout history, right, is if you see in most underdeveloped or developing countries as well, is a lot of people are involved in the agriculture sector. And again, I'm seeing automation of equipment in the agriculture sector, versus here in the US, less than 3 to 4% of the people are involved in agriculture, and the rest of us can keep getting PhDs until we're 35, until we're middle age, basically. And that's okay too. So that's true freedom.
Like I'm at 29, so not quite 35 yet.
Not middle aged, okay.
Yeah, really just called out Jin there.
It's totally true.
Yeah, he's partying the rest of the time.
Yeah,
But
cool. And sorry. Where do you see the role of the federal government or even local government at the policy level kind of shaping this future of mobility tech? What needs to happen?
yeah, absolutely all of the above. Look, federal government, they can come in with regulation, they can come in with money, but it's truly up to local municipalities, local agencies to understand what their people need. How do we have a better standard of living? And what are the ways to do that? And how do you leverage technology to get there? There's a new concept called 15-minute city, which is that within 15 minutes, I can get to a grocery store, I can get to the university or job that I'm at, I could get to most of the social life, most of the things I do on a day-to-day basis. And that's a great concept, which I think the pandemic has allowed us to really rethink how we shape our cities and hopefully move towards this 15-minute vision. What we've seen is people take over their cities. Where you live is where you can also go walk down the street and engage with people. And we've seen pamphlets come up in literally every city across the world. A city like Paris, just in the last year, 17% of the people have gotten a scooter. So it's either electric or non-electric scooter, but 17% of the people there, just in the last year, have acquired a micromobility device. That tells me people are looking to make shorter trips, quicker trips, easier trips as well.
It's been wonderful getting to talk to you, Prachi. Given your work experiences in all these different types of organizations, what are some of the challenges that you faced in your own career and advice that you would give to someone who want to know, like, what's the next step they should take?
Jinian, thanks for that question. I think as future generations look to different jobs and technologies, a question that's often asked is, what are the skill sets that are going to be relevant for tomorrow? The World Economic Forum, in fact, came out with the next industrial revolution. They said, all right, we're going to lose a ton of jobs because everything's going to be automated, and we have this digitalization of things as well. So we won't need as many people and skill sets. And in fact, this disproportionately hurts women. In fact, for every one job that's lost by a man, 3 jobs will be lost by a woman as a result of this kind of vision we are moving towards. So what I would tell people is work on the cutting edge in your field. The basic skills of mathematics, physics, computer science, engineering, all that is still going to be relevant. It's just going to be applied differently. And it's actually with this kind of problem and dilemma that a few of us from MIT, not from Harvard, but from MIT, we started a foundation called Womanium. So Womanium, like plutonium, titanium, the element of woman. The whole goal is to train young people, especially young women. We've trained women all the way from high school up to postdoctorate level and train them in the cutting edge of their fields. So one example of a program we did is with the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, where there was a small lab that was working on the next generation of fMRI technologies. So this lab had about 16 men and 1 woman. And this woman said, well, we are hiring. I'm the only woman. It would be nice to have more of me here. And we made a program with her and her team. And we thought, okay, maybe if we train like 50 people, and I think that would be pretty good. We would have like double the number of experts in this field. There's 17 of you. But, if we train 50, that's a good number. Instead, we had over 720 students from 40 different countries sign up for our program. In fact, this was so successful that we had a communication platform where students could ask each other questions during the training. And any question, on average, will be answered within 8 minutes. I mean, I think that's a better metric than even Harvard, right? Like you have to call your TA or find a roommate somewhere else or a classmate. Yeah, we got, again, so much engagement from this. Then we train the students. We send them to one of the largest neuroscience conferences and had them present. We had a boot camp. They were present at NIH. And then many of them got recruited by sister organizations and other organizations we partner with as well. So it was quite a success. So that's what I would advise. Always stay at the cutting edge. This is where what has me excited in everything that I do, from standard making to working on innovation and with startups. And of course, it's something I think in every field, a person who knows what's coming forward with a person that will be a leader.
That's incredible. Do you mind speaking to your own personal experience as a woman in STEM? Like, did you face some of these challenges and how did you overcome them?
I've had a fantastic experience working. Typically, I'm the only woman in a lot of meetings and in a lot of teams. I've had an amazing time. I think the US and at least the people I've worked with are extremely meritocratic. And in fact, some of almost all of my mentors have been men as well. So I would say it's not a man versus women issue. It's really coming together and encouraging each other to do the best that we can together.
This podcast is called How Tech Becomes Law. So given your experience, how have you seen a technology and its design create new rules for how society operates?
Absolutely. So the first thing I will tell you is laws sometimes hold back technology. If I ask any person in Silicon Valley, they'll say they hate lawyers, like people who will just add more difficulties and hurdles and start off with a no. We are people of technology. We like to say, yes, this can happen, and then figure out the path to make it happen. However, of course, laws, especially consumer laws that are meant to protect people or the environment, all of those are strongly encouraged. What I've seen in my industry is the transportation and mobility sector is a little bit boring. It's a bit of like concrete and rich people most of the time. And then around 2010, when Uber came around, there was, Uber did phenomenally. They phenomenally alienated cities because they saw the taxi industry go away. But they were also phenomenal in their success and their growth. And that has sparked a lot more innovations. I would say the micro-mobility sector really came about. It's because of the pushing the barriers and boundaries that Uber really did. And of course, Lyft afterwards, but that Uber really pushed. So what happened is that when the micro-mobility revolution came around, 2013, 2014 onwards, and cities were seeing, again, these new kind of scooters everywhere, they rose on that very quickly. They started working with consultants. They started consulting each other and said, okay, how do we better manage this kind of innovation that we're seeing on our streets? And they came up with policies. They came up with policies so that the scooters are not littering all the sidewalks and hurting pedestrians, that the scooters are not causing problems to cars as well because of the variation with speeds and the expectations of how a road should be used. But also, what are the data sharing standards, right? How many scooters are on a road? What are the number of scooters that are abandoned? And what is the responsibility of the private sector player to make sure that scooters are parked in the right place, that they're not getting dumped in the river by random people? So really putting the onus on the private sector to come up and say, let's better manage you. And then we could welcome you into our cities as long as it's done well and done responsibly. So that was just in the last 7 to 10 years that we've seen cities wake up and say, there's so much innovation happening in our field. Let's embrace it. And while we embrace it, do it well so that the companies are doing it responsibly and our citizens, the pedestrians, people who need mobility solutions, their needs are getting met.
Fantastic. Hey, thank you so much for joining, Prachi. This is incredible. Always fantastic to hear from you and to chat with you. And thank you for listening. I'm Dhruv Gupta with Jinyan Zhang, and this was How Tech Becomes Law.
Thanks for listening to How Tech Becomes Law. We are supported by the Public Interest Tech Lab. You can find us online at howtechbecomeslaw.org and on social media channels at Tech Becomes Law. The music for this podcast was produced by Clarence Yap. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps other listeners discover us. Thanks again for listening, and come back next week for another conversation on how tech becomes law.